Russia was once again engulfed by a night raid of unknown drones, which broke through the defenses and destroyed Putin's strategic military targets. At the same time, 4 Russian drones entered the airspace of Moldova and Romania. Zelenskyy spoke about the consequences of Russia's attack on Ukraine and called for increased pressure on Russia. At this time, the situation on the front is extremely tense, but the Ukrainian armed forces are holding the line, not allowing the occupiers to break through the defenses in the Kupiansk direction. In the Zaporizhzhia direction as well. The Ukrainian armed forces are also putting pressure on the enemy and defending all positions. Whenever possible, Ukrainian defenders launch counteroffensives. Details in our military review.
One of the longest and most massive attacks since the start of the full-scale war. That's how the head of Krasnodar Krai, Veniamin Kondratyev, described the nighttime attack on his region. Drones also visited the Russian city of Taganrog in the Rostov region. An aircraft manufacturing plant was attacked there. The Ukrainian General Staff confirmed the destruction of a Russian experimental A-60 aircraft as well as a drone manufacturing facility.
This aircraft is equipped with laser technology, and it is the only one of its kind in the Russian aerospace forces. That makes this unprecedented. In terms of the success of the Ukrainian Defense Forces' strike on legitimate military targets within the territory of the occupying country.
In addition, in Novorossiysk, Russia, there was a strike on an oil terminal. Stands and a launcher from an S-400 air defense missile system warehouse were hit. The Tuapse oil refinery was also struck.
Let me remind you of the technical specifications of the bars. It has a range of about 700 kilometers. The warhead weighs between 50 and 100 kilograms, with a target engagement range accordingly. The Neptune's length and its target engagement range is about 1,000 kilometers. Therefore, striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation is yet another proof of the successful work of the Ukrainian defense industry.
It is also unsafe in the Russian digital space. Ukrainian hackers breached the alert system in Krasnodar Krai, which resulted in the activation of chemical and radiation alarms there. Instead of defending their own regions, the Russian army fired at Ukrainians. A video appeared online showing at least 8 caliber missiles being launched from Novorossiysk towards Ukraine. At the same time, the Russians attacked residential buildings where peaceful people were sleeping. The president of Ukraine stated that the enemy struck several regions of our country, but the epicenter was Kyiv. According to him, the occupiers sent more than 460 drones into Ukraine, 4 of which entered Moldova and Romania. It is necessary
to interpret this kind of attack not only as targeting Ukrainian territory, but also accordingly as targeting the territory of Moldova and Romania, as a tactic by the Russian Federation to raise the stakes during the time of crucial international meetings.
The situation along the line of contact remains tense. The occupying army is trying to break through in Pokrovsk.
Ukrainian defense forces managed to carry out a sweep almost in the city center. We are talking about the successful actions of Ukrainian assault units in the area of the Pokrovsk Pedagogical College, Soborna Square, and the railway station. In addition, Ukrainian defense forces have expanded their presence both in Pokrovsk itself and, accordingly, have carried out a number of successful counterattacks.
The defenders on the Kupiansk direction are not allowing the occupiers to break through the Ukrainian defenses. Here, the Russians are trying to break through with small assault groups, but they are immediately stopped by the Ukrainian armed forces. Our defenders are employing active defense tactics in the Zaporizhzhia direction and seize every opportunity to launch counterattacks.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Adam Kadyrov is 18. Now this unhinged heir to a criminal clan is officially of age. Watch right now to learn about his creative journey, bizarre antics, and intriguing plans for the future. In
Chechnya, it's a celebration. Adam Kadyrov has turned 18. His coming of age is marked not just by congratulations, but by an entire set of symbols, as if this date carries political significance. Ramzan Kadyrov offered his son words of support, once again emphasizing that Adam Kadyrov is an important figure in both the family and the public sphere. Now the younger Kadyrov is officially an adult, but it feels like in the public sphere he has long been portrayed differently, bigger, louder and more significant than his actual age. Since
November 2023, he worked as the head of the department ensuring his father's security service, and in April 2025, he became the head of the Regional Security Council. Considering that his father was also a security officer for the previous president, there is a strong possibility that Ramzan is grooming a successor for himself.
Every appearance in official footage, every congratulation, every joint public event seems to weave him into the script for the future. And the father's congratulation is not just a family tradition, but a gesture that once again sparks discussions about what role Kadyrov's son might take on in the future.
Radom was promoted to curator of the Chechen Ministry of Internal Affairs and then to secretary of the Republic's Security Council, for which he is also unqualified due to his age, not even objectively, but simply by the formal criteria that are set there. In other words, a teenager who became known for beating a helpless detainee has made a meteoric career and received the highest honors.
The list of awards and titles Adam received by the age of 18 is striking not for the scale of his achievements, which are little known, but for the speed at which he accumulated them. It's almost a phenomenon in itself, such a young age, yet such a list of official distinctions. However, the question of his merits to the country remains open.
Adam is not known as a romantic young man at all, but rather as someone who has already used violence in practice. As you may recall, 2 years ago, at the age of 15, Adam personally beat up a detainee in a pre-trial detention center, the well-known blogger from Grozny, Nikita Zhurevel. Any other teenager would have ended up in a juvenile detention facility for something like that. But in the case of Kadyrov Jr., the opposite happened. He was rewarded.
Every time Ramzan Kadyrov publicly acknowledges his son, the topic of succession resurfaces. It's not that there are absolutely no official statements, but the hints, the nuances, and the very way the footage is presented create the impression that a political succession is being shaped. Considering the presence of other members of the Kadyrov clan in power, everything becomes perfectly clear.
As the publication Prokt has established, he has 96 relatives who are not just present, but have been placed in important and lucrative positions.
Adam is not just a family member, but part of a structure that has been formed over a long time and in a very deliberate way. Adam's recent wedding also turned out to be a public event of significant scale. For some, it's a sign of coming of age and adherence to tradition. For others, it's just another detail in the carefully crafted image. However, the scale of that wedding raised quite a few questions.
Expensive watches and cars for the offspring of the Chechen little Tsar who despises the law, is that really what they think is worth dying for? In addition to violating the sanctions regime, there's also clear disregard for Russian laws. Adam Kadyrov is not yet of legal age. He will only turn 18 on November 24th. Nevertheless, he was boldly driving a car, even though Russian law prohibits obtaining a driver's license before the age of 18.
And so Adam Kadyrov is approaching adulthood in a position that can hardly be called the result of his own personal journey. He is surrounded by awards, titles, and public gestures that say much more about the system than about him personally.
It is actually possible to break away from the Russian army and find safety far from Putin's empire of terror. Vladimir's example proves this. He is already far from the front, from bullets and persecution. Here are stories of a daring escape and advice for those Russians who want to break free from the meat grinder of war and breathe freely.
Vladimir Bernhard is an ordinary Russian guy from the town of Abinsk in the Krasnodar region. In September 2022, he was mobilized into the Russian army. He is a patriot and a decent citizen. He was loyal to the Kremlin's policies and supported the so-called special military operation. But after finding himself in the hell of war, he radically changed his point of view.
There is no justice, and it turns out that our state, represented by our leaders, does not create this justice. They don't want to pursue it, and they don't want to instill it.
Vladimir served for more than 2 years in a medical evacuation company. He saved soldiers and provided them with first aid. 3 months after he began his service, his views became anti-war. In 2023, the man started a blog on Telegram and a YouTube channel called Cossack's Diary, where he reported directly from the front lines about the meat grinder assaults and the officers' attitude toward ordinary soldiers. For this, Vladimir was thrown into a pit, beaten, and even threatened with being zeroed out, but the truth teller did not give up.
In December 2024, I didn't return to the front after my leave and went on the run. I lived in the forest, tried to catch fish and game, and gathered berries and mushrooms. In August 2025, I tried to cross the border between Russia and Georgia illegally, through the mountains, having gotten there by motorcycle. Legally, I couldn't. Firstly, I was put on the federal wanted list due to a criminal case for leaving my unit without permission. Secondly, I did not have a valid Russian or international passport.
Vladimir was unable to cross the border into Georgia after 10 months of wandering and an unsuccessful attempt to leave the Russian Federation, Vandernos, to his private home in Kubinsk, where he began to prepare a new plan to escape the country. I was considering the option of fleeing to Finland, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. I even thought about living in a shack in Siberia. But after some time, the neighbors handed Vladimir over to the security forces. The man was detained several hundred meters from the house.
They put handcuffs on me, forced me face down to the ground, and started beating me. They hit me with the butt of a rifle and kicked me with their boots. Fortunately, I used to practice universal combat and know how to turn away to soften the blows. My teeth and ribs remained intact. One of the officers who was beating me asked if I had any knives and where my documents and money were. He asked about the money 2 or 3 times. I pointed out where everything was. Later, it turned out that I was missing more than 80,000 rubles. Almost all my funds, which I had planned to use to escape.
Vladimir was held in the building of the military commandant's office, in a cell with 4 other detainees. They had to sleep on the floor, food was brought to them, and they were taken to the toilet under guard. After 3 weeks of hellish conditions, the man was taken for interrogation by FSB officers. They told him that a criminal case was being prepared against him for spreading fake news, for posts about what was really happening on the front line. The prospect, 2 criminal cases, a lenient sentence, and then being sent back to the front line. Vladimir once again began to think about an escape plan. This time, he, along with several dozen other escapees like him, was sent to a military unit in the Krasnodar region, where they were kept under guard by the military. During this time, Vladimir established a reputation as a runaway who had come to his senses. He was issued a new Russian Federation passport.
I woke up at 4 a.m., went to the bathroom and saw that the entire shift of guards was asleep. I walked past them, jumped over the fence, made my way through the bushes, got into the city and called a taxi. And I went to the place where my motorcycle and the things that had been prepared for me in advance were waiting. Then I took off on my motorcycle toward the border with Belarus.
The man had to evade the traffic police several times, crashed his motorcycle, and had to throw away part of his gear. After that, he continued on by hitchhiking, using BlaBlaCar, and taking taxis. After 2 weeks on the run, he made it to Smolensk, from where he set out on foot toward the border with Belarus.
I'm walking along the Wild Boar Trail. But this just doesn't quite feel right to me, not at all, not like it does over there, in that other place. It said very clearly, 560 meters to the Gribovka field, which is just up ahead. I keep thinking about it, and honestly, something about this situation just feels off. It doesn't sit well with me, not the way it should.
He managed to cross the border without encountering any border guards. In Belarus, Vladimir exchanged money, got a room, and cleaned himself up. After that, he bought a ticket and flew to another country. Now, after everything he's been through, Vladimir understands that a new, difficult life in exile awaits him. And that is something he will never forgive the Kremlin for.
Most likely, I will never return to my homeland, even though I always wanted to live only in Russia. At the very least, I will dedicate part of my life to fighting the Putin regime within the means available to me. I will never forgive him for destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and for forcing me to part with my loved ones and my native country. In almost a year of my desertion, counting from last December when I didn't return to the war after my leave, I have never once doubted my decision. Under no circumstances am I willing to return to the front anymore. During the war, I became a pacifist, and I am not willing to betray my values and principles.
That's all. For more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.